Welcome back to another episode of Limitless Lives. Today we have a truly fascinating guest who lives in a world where the line between dreams and reality blurs, crafting a narrative that speaks to the heart of our unconscious intelligence. Joining us is Michael Olsen, a man who just doesn't study dreams, he harnesses them. Michael is not only a dream scientist, but also a best-selling author and an awarded speaker renowned for his expertise in unconscious intelligence and nocturnal dreams. Michael's journey is anything but ordinary. His career trajectory took a remarkable turn when a powerful nocturnal dream compelled him to pivot from leadership roles in the pharmaceutical industry to embracing leadership training in 2008. By 2012, Michael had founded Dream Alive, his own company dedicated to exploring and teaching about the power of dreams. He's on a mission to ignite the corporate world with what he calls dream power. Michael believes in the untapped potential that lies within our sleep, and he's here to tell us how it can transform our waking lives. Recognized with the prestigious Danish Talent 100 Award, he captured audience hearts as an empathetic host of The Dream Mirror, a weekly national radio show regularly featured in the media for his work as a dream scientist. Michael's insights challenge us to reconsider the importance of our dreams and the secrets they hold to unlocking our full potential. Get ready to be inspired as we journey into the subconscious on today's show with Michael. Michael, welcome to Limitless Lives.
Thank you so much, Nilesh. It's a true pleasure to be sitting here talking to you.
Great. Could you start by explaining what exactly you mean by unconscious intelligence and how it relates to our nocturnal dreams?
Oh, sure. This is kind of a funny thing to point out how huge a difference it made when I started calling dreams our unconscious intelligence, or I also sometimes call them our sleeping intelligence, for my ability to get to talk about dreams at workplaces compared to just calling them dreams. There's a lot of skepticism around dreams. So when I started calling it unconscious intelligence, suddenly it really opened up for me being able to get to workplaces and talk about dreams. But when I then say unconscious intelligence, it's broader than just dreams. It's really also bodily sensations, it's gut feel, intuition, all this kind of mental stuff, but also physical stuff going on inside our brains, in our bodies, beyond our awareness. So it's quite broad. But obviously, in my context, it's really only focusing about dreams in the sense that dreams are, to a certain extent, quite specific, quite concrete. I mean, they're kind of there, right? You can't really negotiate that. Many people can't recall their dreams, but I haven't come across anyone who can really say, I've never had a dream in my life, right? So you can't really argue with the fact that they're there. Maybe compared to intuition, gut feel, it's kind of more difficult to grasp. And that's why I often say, if in doubt, take a look in your dreams. I mean, dreams are literally, intuition in your face, so to speak. It's really, what am I to do in this specific situation? I have a decision to make. I'm very much in doubt. Well, let me sleep upon it and let's see what hides in my dreams.
That's so fascinating when you talk about let's see what hides in our dreams. And that leads me to my next question around how did the nocturnal dream that you had influence your decision to transition from a career in the pharmaceutical industry to focusing on dream science and leadership training?
Yeah. Well, I've had many dreams facilitating my journey and the shifts that I've made. I'd say it really, headline wise, it's really about conquering the fear that are often involved in terms of making those big shifts. But I had a dream on the night after having accepted a position in Indianapolis, working for, back then Eli Lilly, American Pharmaceutical Corporation. I'd had at that point, I think, working in that world for some 6 years. And I was at that point very much in doubt as to whether that next move was the right thing for me to do. From the outside, it seemed very fascinating and interesting, bigger paycheck, bigger responsibility, classical patent role of house and car paid for, nice salary on top. And it's like, what's not to like? And working in an American company would be natural for me as a Dane, most of the time having worked in the Danish affiliate, partly also in Singapore for Eli Lilly. It would be natural for me to come by the American headquarter in that career. But I was in doubt as to whether that would be the right thing for me to do. But I didn't know what else to do. So I was kind of thinking to myself, okay, if it turns out to be not that nice and not what I hoped it to be, I could always go back. So I decided to say yes. And then on the night following that decision, I had this dream of a woman who was kneeling down next to a long, narrow grave. She was deeply moved, mourning, really. She wasn't crying, but she was really sad. And as she sat there, she was burying a number of dead babies, little blue, cold babies. And a dream like that is exactly one of those dreams where many would say, okay, isn't that kind of weird and mumbo jumbo, etc. And some of my business school classmates told me, Michael, you shouldn't be telling that dream as I've done on public TV, etc. You shouldn't be sharing that dream. People might think that you're a lunatic. But hey, that's the language of dreams. The best person to understand, to interpret a dream is the one that had it, right? So, in other words, I'm the best person at interpreting my own dreams. It doesn't necessarily mean that I right away understand a dream because they use weird language. And that's part of why I'm here. The books that I write, the talks that I do is to help people approach their dreams in ways so that they could understand them. And one way that you could go about the dream that I had, you could be asking, Michael, dead babies or babies in general, what are they to you? And babies to me can grow up and become almost anything. So that dream to me made it very clear that by continuing that career, I would be burying the development opportunities, talents, etc. And the funny thing is, I woke up with that from that dream, feeling very, very sad about the whole situation, and I right away understood what the dream was telling me. But the funny thing is, I decided to go anyway, and then I ended up working 1.5 years in Indianapolis. As I normally say about that time, I have never in my life made as much money and at the same time been as sad as I was. There were so many nights where I woke up crying and feeling really sad and stressed out about the fact that I was to wake up very soon and go to a work that really didn't make me shine, really didn't make me flourish. So that dream kept on popping up in my head while I was there. And at some point in time, I was approached by my colleague, by my boss, really, who asked me, so, Michael, would you like to spend another 3 years here working with us? And I was like, whoa, is there something you can't see or what? It's funny how we can perform on the outside and then be crumbling on the inside sometimes. And since that dream had kept coming up in my consciousness during my time in the US, I knew intuitively, very strongly, that there was something better out there for me. I didn't really know what at the time, but I knew that I was not to continue that career. And that's when, then with the strength, with the courage coming from that dream, I declined that opportunity. And then I came back to the Danish affiliate. I was offered another role in Europe, where, as such, again, in that world, an interesting job overseeing some countries in Europe, marketing wise, for one of the company's brands. Whereas, the only thing I saw in that role was sitting in an airplane all the time, doing something that wasn't the right thing for me, meaning I wasn't really doing what I'm here for. I wasn't really applying my innate strengths, where an innate strength is something that we're not only good at, but it also energizes us while doing it. We can easily be good at something without it really energizing us. That's when I stopped that career really and started seeing a career coach who helped me figure out that when I was teaching my reps as a sales manager, my sales reps, teaching them sales, or as a brand manager, teaching my sales reps about the disease areas that we were working with. It was in psychiatry, so bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, depression, etc. And those were days that I really looked forward to, and I was totally high on energy when I came home from work. Only challenge was that it was something I did only one day every third month or so, whenever a new rep came on board. So it became relatively clear that, teaching, presenting, those types of roles was really situations in which I felt really alive while at work. So that's how that burying dead babies dream really made me make that change of going in a, well, very different direction. And then later on, I had another dream that then sent me into founding my own company. And for the past 12 years, having been working on my own.
That's fascinating. You mentioned so many pieces in there, and I'd love to tap into that a little bit more. You talked about understanding what's happening in our dreams and how that can then maybe inform our waking life. Based on that, can you share with us the science behind how our dreams can inform and influence our waking life decisions and creativity?
I can. And if we start out with the creativity part from brain research, there are basically two ways of studying dreams. There's a classical biological or natural sciences approach, if you want, classical brain research, brain imaging research, measuring brain waves while sleeping. That's one way of studying dreams. The other way of studying dreams is what I would often call the psychological dream research, where we all look into the areas of what do we actually dream about? Are there any differences between men and women in terms of dream content? And yes, there is. Are there any differences in terms of our ability to recall dreams between men and women? And again, yes, there are differences. Typically, women are a tad bit better than men, but not as much better as many would think. And then at the same time, kids are better at recalling their dreams than grown-ups are. And then also psychological dream research would look into the field of what actually comes out of us trying to understand our dreams. If we start doing what some will call dream work, i.e., basically considering our dreams, what are we dreaming about, and how might that be relevant to my life right now, that would result in increased personal insight, in higher self-esteem, and better relations to others. So those are some of the conclusions from the more psychological type dream research. So to come back to the question on creativity, there the answer, the science would very much come from the biological and natural sciences approach, where it has been shown many times by now through brain imaging research how a bigger part of our so-called prefrontal cortex, i.e., the part of our brain that is immediately behind our forehead, is basically inactive, or bigger parts of it is inactive while we sleep and especially while we dream. That part of our brain is also the part of our brain where our rational thinking lies, our waking life consciousness lies. So when we then are in REM sleep state, we are kind of not able to think rationally, so to speak. So the rational part of our brain is more or less shut down. And that leads our brain to be able to problem solve in highly creative ways. There's a researcher at Harvard who recently retired, but 2 years ago published a book called When Brains Dream. And he characterizes the REM sleep state as our most creative brain state. And basically what he says is that in that state, our brain is looking for solution between loosely, as what he calls loosely connected or loosely associated elements. What he really means there is that the brain is looking for solutions in a way that would not be possible in the classical waking state. And I'd often share an example of how that happens when I get that question from my own life. Because when I just published my first book, How to Understand Your Dreams, unfortunately not yet available in English, it will be. But when I just published that book, I was naturally very occupied with thinking, how can I get this book in the hands of as many people as possible, and for that book, them to make a difference in their lives. I was thinking so much about that. And if there's something our dreams are about, it is the worries, the problems, the challenges that we have in our waking life. It's really something that our dreams would normally try to. So after having pondered that question for, 3-4 days intensively, I suddenly have this dream where I see a school principal who comes running at me, almost screaming, saying, Michael, we need your book. And waking up from that dream, then it suddenly dawns upon me, oh yeah, of course. And what then dawns upon me is the immediate connection between the fact that around 2 weeks every year, I get contacted by, I would almost say, hordes of primary school, elementary school pupils or students who are writing some kind of project on dreams. And they have a ton of questions. And in fact, that I'm being contacted by huge groups of school pupils in certain periods per year. And the fact that I had just published a book that answers most of those questions was not a connection I saw in real life, in waking life at that point. But with that dream, I suddenly realized, oh yeah, of course. And then I started contacting the Danish School Teachers Union, Kindergarten Teachers Union, and various organizations that could help me bring my book into the libraries of schools. So it's just an example of discovering such loosely associated elements. So that's on the side of creativity. We're simply in a very creative brain state while we sleep.
That's incredible. It sounds like there's so much going on in the brain during that time when we're sleeping.
There
And
is, indeed there is.
you talked on your dream that gave you that shift of career, and it was quite a graphic dream for you. I'm curious, how do we ensure our dreams do not impact our waking life into living a fear-based life?
Well, that's a very good question. If we're not aware of our dreams, that's unfortunately exactly what would often happen. One of my good friends, Deirdre Barrett from Howard University, she looked into this interesting field of Rona or COVID-19 related dreams. She basically got an overview and found out that currently during the pandemic, many of us tended to have the same types of dreams. So in the early phases of the pandemic, many tended to dream about mystic figures, threatening figures coming into our bedrooms where we maybe slept with our families that, kind of threatened us on our lives. Suddenly monsters coming up in front of us at the sidewalk, stuff outside ourselves threatening us. And that's how many of us felt about COVID-19 early on. What is this? We heard about it happening in Italy, and suddenly it spread, and, but we didn't know what it was. Could it kill us or couldn't it? What is it? So those dreams really kind of portrayed how many of us felt about this, virus. And if we weren't aware of our dreams, what would then often happen? I mean, here in Denmark, very early on, what people did when waking up in the morning after a night. I mean, let's say you went to bed after having watched the news. You heard about this strange thing going on in Italy. It seems like it's now coming to Denmark. And then you went to bed without really thinking much about it. Then in your dreams, what you saw on TV could propel out of proportion after having had those dreams about threatening types of people or monsters or whatever threatening you on your life. So you would wake up full of anxiety in the morning. And the first thing you then did, of course, was to rush down to the local supermarket and buy 100 pieces of rolls of toilet paper and, dry yeast, 50 packets that you're never going to use, stuff like that. So if you're not aware of your dreams, if you're not conscious about them, then very often you'll be driven by the fear that they themselves, the dreams in themselves, can kind of propel out of proportion. So it's just to mention one way how our dreams can inform us about, unconscious fears that we might have, so that we could wake up and be more conscious about, okay, right now I'm gripped by fear, and then confront that, work with that, embrace that fear, and then take us to a place where we can maybe take more conscious, more informed, more, I would even say more rational decisions compared to the decisions we often take based on fear.
For dreaming, it's our opportunity to process what's happened during the day, because during our sleep state, we're not really affected by anything that's happening externally in terms
Oh,
of some of the five senses that our mind brings it into the fold during our wake state. What is your thoughts and what's your take on that?
well, I think you're very right. I mean, our brain, while sleeping, would really digest, would really try to make sense out of whatever we experience during the day. I mean, modern day dream research would say that we dream for various reasons. We dream in order to recall things. So, in memory consolidation, we dream in order to learn something that we are right now learning. Let's say we're trying to learn how to drive a car. If we get to sleep upon after having, let's say, taken a driver's lessons compared to not getting to sleep, then having slept an hour after a lesson, we would be better at driving while waking up compared to those not driving. So we dream in order to become better at what we're trying to learn, but we also dream to solve our problem. And that's a major thing, talking about dreams and creativity. And when our dreams then really can't solve a problem like, the pandemic, and, what is this? I can't really deal with it, then it kind of spurs out of control. So we dream to solve our problems, but we also dream to wake up connected to the problems, I guess, in a better mood. It's called the mood regulating function of dreaming. So you could go frustrated, stressed out to bed and wake up in a better mood. And typically you would have dreamt something that left you at a better place. But at the same time, you could also go kind of happy to bed and then wake up very frustrated and afraid because of something you then dreamt, which really just talks to you. There's something going on inside us that we're not too conscious about right now. Our dreams serve very many functions. And of course, a lot of it is related to digesting, to relating to whatever happened while we're awake. It's a bigger theory and very validated and very well researched theory in the world of dream research called the continuity hypothesis, which really just looks into what are we actually dreaming about. And then at the same time, asking people to report what's happening in their waking life. What have I done today? Like, writing a very precise diary. I started out doing this, then I did this, and I thought about this and that. And then also writing down what I then dream about. There are huge overlaps between what happens during our day and what we then dream about. And that's the continuity hypothesis. What increases the likelihood that we're going to dream about something that happens in our waking life? Well, the more it affects us emotionally and the more recent a given experience is, the higher the likelihood that we'll dream about it. So it's not so likely that we dream about something that happened 5 days ago. And it's also not really likely that we dream about something that didn't really affect us emotionally. But at the same time, dream research would show as the longer into the night we get, we dream more and more as the night progresses. The amount of REM, we sleep in these so-called sleep cycles every night, having a duration of about 90 minutes. So if we get like, let's say 8 hours of sleep, we pass through 4 to 5 of those sleep cycles. And the amount of REM sleep in those sleep cycles increases. So coming back to what I was just saying before, later in the night, we can sometimes get to dream about something that happened even many years ago in our childhood. Like in my case, I was bullied in primary school for being tall. And as a grown up, I'm 48 now. Luckily, there's longer and longer in between. But I can still dream about those primary school situations where I was bullied, maybe even in the dream being bullied. And then I wake up and I can tell myself, oh no, I fell into that trap again of banging myself in the head, saying unconsciously, obviously, I'm not good enough. I'm not worth anything. All the stuff that I kind of learned about myself, which of course is not true while in primary school.
And you talked about interpretation of dreams. What are the most common misconceptions people have about interpreting their dreams? And how does your approach differ from traditional dream analysis?
Yeah, a good question. I think to begin with, one of the most common misperceptions would simply be to think that your dreams don't mean anything because it's kind of strange language. It doesn't really mean anything. By today, even a very strict kind of natural sciences dream researchers would say that we dream for a reason, and our dreams do serve some function because we're simply too advanced beings for our dreams to not mean anything. Another one, of course, is classical thinking of looking into dream dictionaries. And by the way, I'm not to say that dream dictionaries shouldn't be used, but there are good dream dictionaries and there are very bad ones. And the very bad ones are the ones that say if you dream of this, most Google dream theme is losing your teeth or teeth falling out. Every day, some 40,000 people Google that just in English. So it's a pretty big dream theme across countries, across nationalities, across cultures. Some dictionaries, if you look it up on Google, would say that if you dream about losing your teeth, a close family member would die within the next couple of days or so. And of course, that to me is the wrong way of going about dreams. Again, the best person to really make sense of a dream is the one that had it. But again, you might need help of others who would then ask questions. For instance, one of my approaches is starting out with trying to identify what I call the waking life link. In other words, trying to relate the dream to what happens in your waking life. So that you could do by a very simple question, basically saying, despite this dream maybe appearing awkward and weird and unreal, how might it after all portray something of real relevance that I'm currently not aware about in my life? That question can open up to many, many insights and many interesting conversations. I think the main difference in modern day dream interpretation thinking is that the best person to come up with at least what is the most meaningful interpretation of a dream is the one that had it, compared to saying, let me tell you what your dream means. If you dream this, it most definitely means this, end of story. And that to me that's mumbo jumbo. That's not respecting the dream for what it is, namely an expression in the language of the one that had it, that person's unconscious, of something of true relevance in your life right now. And what I often say when people say, well, why should I pay attention to my dreams? I often say, because by talking about your dreams or trying to understand them, you get to talk about something truly important in your life with regards to your relations that you wouldn't otherwise have. So it's really a very open approach. There are no fixed solutions. It's really getting the person that had the dream to ponder the dream, to consider it, and to really, I would say, get in connection with their own unconscious. And many people are not, of course, right? By not paying attention to their dreams and by not really, let's say, looking inwards when trying to find answers. We often find answers outside ourselves by comparing to others, by letting other people define what is the right way for us to live. I also often refer to the quite famous survey made by the Australian hospice nurse Bronnie Ware, who made it her habit to ask her dying patients as they lay there at their deathbed, looking back on their life, is there something you regret? Is there something you would have done differently? She made this book called Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And regret number 2 was, I wish I'd worked less so that I'd had more time to be with the people that I really love. And biggest regret number 1, I wish I'd had the courage to live my life true to myself. Instead, my life has been mostly about trying to live up to the expectations of others. And, with my own dream of the dead babies, etc., I mean, it just stresses, not trying to avoid having that deathbed regret is, for me, one of the very reasons we should pay more attention to our dreams.
And talk about paying attention to our dreams. You also mentioned something very interesting around we don't tend to do enough introspection, even in our waking life, embracing silence, processing what's happening in our world, and seeing what arises, and just questioning yourself, getting curious with yourself, because we live in such a fast-paced world. We don't take time to pause and take a moment to see and reflect what's truly happening within our waking world and within our sleeping world. And that leads me to my question. From your experience, what are some practical ways individuals can really harness the power of their dreams to enhance their personal and professional lives?
Yeah, well, first of all, I guess the place to start is to try to improve dream recall. If you can't recall your dreams, you have a more difficult time in utilizing the power of your dreams, obviously. So-called dream socialization research shows that when there are differences in our ability to recall our dreams, in many cases, it has to do with how our parents responded to us when we as kids approached them with our dreams. Did they say, oh, luckily that was just a dream? Let's say we woke up from a nightmare. So in other words, let's not talk more about that and just go back to bed and sleep. Or did they say, whoa, there was a bear chasing you. Tell me more. What happened? Did you get away or did it eat you? Well, maybe we don't want to do that at 3:00 in the night. And so we could instead say, whoa, what a scary dream. Luckily, it was just a dream. Let's go back to bed and sleep. And then let's talk about it tomorrow morning as we wake up. And interestingly enough, with the 2 last approaches, in other words, where our parents really thought that they were interesting, wanted to talk about them, wanted to look into it. If that was the approach our parents had, we're simply better at recalling our dreams when we're grown up. Many of us early in life simply lose connection to our unconscious intelligence, i.e. we become really bad at recalling our dreams. So the place to start is to increase dream recall. And that could be as simple as saying, I want to recall my dreams as I wake up. I want to recall my dreams as I wake up. It's just a very practical place to start. Secondly, I would say practical way to harness the power of our dreams is we would say, if you snooze, you lose. And when I do my talks, I often ask the crowd, any of you snoozing in the morning? A lot of people raise their hands and many are not, obviously. I often instead say, if you snooze, you win. Bad news, of course, is with the idea that you don't go back to sleep when snoozing, but you actually just stay put in bed. So rather than minute your alarm rings, you either get out of bed or you immediately pick up your phone and start scrolling social media. Just don't do that, right? And stay in bed, close your eyes in that in-between state of being awake, being asleep, and just stay in that state. And very often, given what I said earlier on how we tend to dream more and more as the night progresses, we would wake up in the middle of a dream. So stay put there, close your eyes, and just ask yourself, okay, so was I dreaming? And yes, there was something about, let's say, me driving a car. And then if you tune in on that, then suddenly the whole dream might appear. So that you could then start either recording it, that would be my suggestion, documenting it in a dictaphone on your smartphone or an old-fashioned dictaphone if you want, or classically write it down. Those are 2 very practical ways. And then I'd add a third one, which for many is the first way that they experience the true power of dreaming or the function, our dreams. And that's what is called dream incubation. So I mentioned earlier Deirdre Barrett from Howard University. A couple of months ago, I was at the South by Southwest conference in Austin. And together with Deirdre, we were doing a workshop called Dream Incubation to facilitate creative problem solving. And let me just say that was a very, very popular workshop. But anyway, dream incubation is basically the idea of following some simple steps to increase the likelihood that you get to dream about a given problem that you have right now in your life, a decision you are to take, or a very practical problem. I've been working in this spreadsheet all day and I can't really figure out, it's not functioning as I want it to, all my programming I've made. What's wrong? Go to bed with that problem and wake up with a solution by following some simple steps. It's really about your subconscious. This problem is important to me, and that increases the likelihood dramatically of you waking up with a solution in the morning. And that's something that Deirdre from Howard did research in. And among other things, she found out that a crowd of people participating in her study already within a week, more than half had dreamt about the problem that they incubated upon. And 43% simply woke up with a solution based on doing that. People actually contact me the day after and saying, hey, Michael, that stuff you told us about dream incubation, those steps, it actually works. I woke up with a solution this morning. I mean, hallelujah. And yes, it does. And that to many is an epiphany of discovering the immense power of our dreams. So trying to increase dream recall, stay put in bed. If you snooze, you win. And then try to dream incubate. And you could literally Google how to dream incubate if you want to look further into it, and then see what happens.
And you've spoken about the concept that you've termed dream power in the corporate world. Can you elaborate on how this concept can be integrated into workplace culture and leadership?
Indeed, I can. First of all, it wouldn't be my intention that we should all be sharing our dreams with one another. For instance, that's sometimes the immediate reaction that I get, because dreams to me are very personal. And when you start talking about your dreams, you often get to talk about something very personal. So you should share the dreams that you really feel like sharing. But rather, I want the individual to start using their dreams to, first of all, become more creative in the problems that are solved at work. Just from the fact that many can no longer recall their dreams, that really means that every day, thousands of very creative solutions are simply lost at workplaces across the globe because many can no longer recall their dreams. So that's one place companies can harness the power of dreams. Another element is a bigger one. There's potentially much to be said, but it's all about increased personal insight. In the world of leadership literature, there's a lot of talk about how we're changing the paradigm right now away from a paradigm focusing on profits, status, power, to a paradigm that's much more focusing on real human thriving, a sense of true meaning at what you do. And to me, as a leader, for instance, tuning in on your dream, direct way of you tapping and into start applying that new paradigm. And why is that so? Well, in older dream literature, you would talk about masculine energy and feminine energy. Where masculine energy, you could also say yin and yang, yin being feminine, yang being masculine energy. So by tuning in on your dreams, you automatically start tuning on the more intuitive sides of yourself. In that sense, the more feminine elements in yourself. And no, masculinity, femininity, in that sense, doesn't have anything to do with gender. It's more a way of thinking. It's more an kind of energy. So if you as a leader start tuning in on your dreams, more and more become much more able at practicing, for instance, what is a big term these days in leadership, psychological safety. The more you embrace your own fears, for instance, an unconscious fear that they have, it's a deep fear of simply not having what it takes, of not being good enough. And if that's a big unconscious fear that you walk around with every day at work as a leader, that often results in you working long hours, working hard, trying to show yourself in the world that you are good enough, which in fact you are. So discovering that is really something that really facilitates a huge change in the way you approach your leadership, because you suddenly embrace all of that fear, all of that uncertainty, and immediately you become a more calm, a more authentic leader, I would.
It's also the self-awareness aspect of that too, in terms of you giving yourself time to allow for introspection, fostering curiosity, and maybe decipher some of the messages that the dreams are conveying.
Yeah.
And then that helps gain valuable insights that can enrich your personal growth maybe people within your teams and so forth. But I think you have to remove some of the noise that's surrounding you and strip it down so
Yeah.
that you truly can be your authentic self, because that then trickles into your teams.
No doubt. I
Trickles.
feel like sharing example of Barack Obama, who works with his dream in the way we're talking about right now. He's very open about it. He published his first biography back in 2004 called Dreams from My Father. It's not the type of dreams that we talk about now. It was more like visions for the future from his dad. But there's a passage in the book where he, over maybe 3-4 pages in great detail, describes a dream that he had the night after his father died. A dream where his father is in jail, which, he's not in real life. I mean, he just died, right? At the same time, as such, he'd never been to jail. If you know the story of Barack Obama, his father left Barack and his mom early in Barack's life to go back to Kenya. And that whole book is very much about who am I, given that I have the father that I've never known. I think a profound question that many kids would ask themselves. They knew they had a father or a mother somewhere, but they haven't been a part of their life. In that dream, his father is in jail, and at the same time, it's kind of a courtroom situation. There's a judge, there's a defending lawyer, an accusing lawyer, and the whole courtroom situation is all about, should his dad be released? I was blown away when I read it, because people had in the dream research community had told me that Barack was using dreams. And when I read that book, I was like, whoa, he's all in. So as he said, I'm the jailer, I'm the judge. What I had done for many years was to put my father in a mental inner prison. I mean, I was angry with him. Why did you leave us? Well, who the hell are you? And how can you just desert me, your son? But with that dream, what really happens is that Barack Obama walks into the prison cell and his father is very weak, very thin. I mean, he just died, right, in real life. And what he says in the dream is that, there you are, handsome young man, to his son, right, Barack Obama. One thing you should know, I've always loved you. And from that, Barack Obama wakes up from the dream and he cries. And as I said, this is the first time that I really cry about my father and that whole relation. In fact, he just died. And something from how it's portrayed in the book falls in place, in the sense that suddenly Barack Obama discovers that most of his life, really in his career, what he has unconsciously been driven by is the deep fear of not being good enough in the eyes of his father, striving for his father's approval. And with that dream, he suddenly discovers, I am good enough. In fact, I've always been good enough. And suddenly you could let go of all of that and suddenly start leading more authentically. So I just think it's quite a good example of what dream work can do to leaders.
That's a telling example of the human experience. We tend to suppress a lot of our past or what's happening in our world, thinking if I just suppress it or just ignore it, it's going to go away.
Yeah.
What ends up actually happening, it buries within the subconscious, and then something will trigger that. And then you start to question, well, why is that happening? I was over it. And, but you're not really, because you haven't given the time to digest it, talk about it, and maybe just explore it a little bit. Sometimes we don't even need to have the answers, but maybe just having that awareness to a particular scenario in our life can really help get us curious and maybe think about, maybe I do need to take care of myself, honor myself a little bit more.
Yeah.
And on that note, it makes me think about what advice you would give to skeptics who may doubt the practicality of dream work.
Well, I think one advice I could give is to study the science. That would say there's actually a lot to gain from starting to more proactively utilizing the power of your dreams. Secondly, if you're a skeptic, I would invite you to just for 1 or 2 weeks, start pondering the question, what if the world is not as I think it is? What if there's actually something to gain from those dreams? So opening up to that whole world, being curious. I mean, the more open and curious you are towards the whole idea of dreams actually being able to help you, the more you're able to recall them, the more they respond to you. So the minute you start playing with them, they start playing with you. And that in itself is a huge discovery for most. Like how I experienced it. In my late 20s, I started seeing this psychologist, and I was really at a bad place in my life, really sad, low on self-esteem. And one of the first times I was there, he asked me, so Michael, do you dream at night? And what do you dream about? And I was like, dreams? I don't dream. Dreams are just a lot of mumbo jumbo, aren't they? What can I say? I'm originally trained at business school, longer, university education, very skeptical. And literally I was thinking at the time that I didn't dream. Today, I know, of course, that I do. We dream about 2 hours every night. So to me, that was just a revelation in itself. Of suddenly, whoa, I'm actually dreaming. I think it's a matter of trying to show the openness and just say, what if there's actually something there? So that would be one thing to say. And then once you've just once experienced the power of your dreams, like how either dream you had, how you thought about it, what it might mean, and then you get this sudden deep understanding about yourself, this deep insight that you didn't have before the dream, or you wake up with a brilliant creative solution to something you've been pondering and or working with at work. I mean, then you're hooked, right? It takes for you to have that first experience.
If you could give a piece of advice around some of the daily or nightly practices we can start incorporating to better connect with our unconscious mind and to be able to interpret our dreams, to live a life without limits, what would that be?
First of all, it would be around having the intention of recalling your dreams. So as you go to bed, say to yourself, I want to recall my dreams when I wake up. I want to recall my dreams. That increases the likelihood dramatically that you would suddenly start recalling your dreams. Even the fact, having listened to this podcast where we've talked about dreams, increases the likelihood dramatically of you, the listener, actually recalling your dreams tonight. So it's a matter of, tuning in on that whole world. So the intention is a big thing. And then documenting your dreams. And traditionally, yes, write it down on a piece of paper. But as I said earlier on, record your dreams on either your smartphone, dictaphone, or a classical dictaphone. And then this big question that I also mentioned earlier on, despite this dream maybe appearing weird at the outset, how might it, after all, portray something that is truly relevant to me in my life right now that I'm apparently not too conscious about? That question can really open up to interesting insights, discoveries, but also conversations with others.
Michael, this has been a truly fascinating conversation, full of insights. I'm really hoping it gets people curious about their waking world as their dreams. I want to thank you so much. What a wonderful conversation. And thank you for all the work you're doing in this space.
Thank you. It was a true pleasure talking to you. And thank you for doing what you do and giving me the opportunity to talk about dreams here.
Thank you so much. And thanks everyone to tuning in to another episode of Limitless Lives.